In general, people think that global warming and climate change are the same thing, but they're not. So, what is climate change? Well, climate change describes a complex shift now affecting our weather and climate systems, and not simply the change in temperatures. Climate change encompasses not only the rising average temperatures, but also extreme weather events, the shifting wildlife populations and habitats, rising sea levels, and a range of other impacts, such as heat trapping greenhouse gases that cause global warming.
How do humans contribute to climate change? Human activity as a cause of climate change is essentially in the form of burning fuels, cutting down forests, farming, and livestock. These activities add enormous amounts of greenhouse gases to those already naturally occurring in the atmosphere, causing global warming and climate change. Let's look at what is really changing. Human-induced global warming is currently increasing at a rate of 0.36 Fahrenheit per decade. The average temperatures in 2019 reached 2 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels, which was the warmest recorded in the decade 2011 to 2020. Turning to cars and transportation. Greenhouse gas emissions from cars and other forms of transportation account for roughly 27% of total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, making transportation the largest contributor to U.S. gas emissions. Worldwide, highway vehicles release about 1.4 billion tons of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere each year, mostly in the form of carbon dioxide, contributing to global climate change. Each gallon of gasoline we burn creates 20 pounds of greenhouse gases, which is roughly 5 to 9 tons of greenhouse gases each year for each typical vehicle. What about the impact of air pollution? Air pollution is caused by solid and liquid particles and gases that are suspended in the air that we breathe, and it's essentially devastating for our human species, especially for children and women, with high risk of miscarriage, low birth weight, and premature death due to pneumonia and other respiratory infections, heart disease, and lung cancer. Newborns suffer impaired lung and brain development, while air pollutants mostly come from cars and truck exhaust, factories, dust storms, pollen, mold spores, wildlife, and heat waves and volcanoes. As temperatures change, many species are on the move. Some species, including mosquitoes, ticks, and crop pests, such as the bark beetle that feed on spruce and pine trees, are blooming with devastating impact on millions of forested acres around the world. As the ecosystems continue to change, some species will move further north and become more successful. Others, such as polar bears, won't be able to adapt and could become extinct. In response to the intense climate activism of children and young people this decade, UNICEF developed the Children's Climate Risk Index to draw attention to the immediacy of the climate crisis as a child rights issue unfolding here and now. Climate Risk Index is extremely valuable as a tool because it is a lens through which you can see and measure the consequences of the impact of climate change. Of course, here we are also looking at how to use such an index to better prepare for the future. So, for example, the Climate Risk Index will help us identify what kinds of resiliency we need to build into school systems, into homes, in shelters, into situations for children who are on the move, displaced children, refugee children, health centers and hospitals, making them climate resistant and weatherproof. When looking at the Climate Risk Index, we find that Nearly half the children in the world live in situations of extreme high risk, with rapidly rising global surface temperatures and drought. The heat maps show the intensity of each shock and the level of risk of exposure. Worldwide, nearly 2 billion children, 90% of children on Earth, are exposed to air pollution of one type or the other. Africa, Europe, and Asia have the highest concentration of risk and exposure to air pollution, combined with extreme vulnerability to soil and water pollution. The risk and exposure to heat waves is highest in North America, Africa, Europe, and Asia. Children in Latin America, North America, and Asia are highly vulnerable to cyclones, flooding, and wind exposure. 920 million children face the prospect of water scarcity. Water stress is especially severe in Asia, Latin America, North America, and Africa. Pillar 1 of the Children's Climate Risk Index shows regions of the world where climate change stressors and shocks are predominant. Pillar 2 highlights the regions of the world where child vulnerability predominates. Overall, these vulnerabilities and risk exposure overlap with chronic hunger, food insecurity, poverty, and a chronic lack of access to social protection and basic social services.
With all the intimidating and frightening news on climate change and its potential dangers, is there any good news at all? Well, yes. Around the world, there are organizations determined to restore our oceans and coral reefs, find new and sustainable energy sources, and establish massive forest reservations to protect endangered species and wildlife.
And, this is an area in which young people themselves are extremely passionate. I haven't found, apart from children's rights issues, which really touch young people in a very special way, I haven't found any other global concern that is of such deep, that really deeply engages young people like the issue of climate change.
Together, we have a single mission. We are the first generation to feel the sting of climate change. Through our collective action in spreading the good news of climate restoration and protection for our planet, we can reverse our course and save our planet.